Here we go. It's the System Failure Podcast, number 18, coming to you live high above Congress Street. How are we doing this week, Nate?
Hey, Brian. I'm doing excellent as usual. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. Well, we missed a week of the podcast. Well, I was out in Pittsburgh watching football and playing Magic the Gathering. So, our listeners will have to, our devoted listener base will have to forgive us for that one.
Yeah, all three of them or however many people are out there listening. How was the Berg? I usually had quite a good time whenever, the one time I went to Pittsburgh, I went there to see some Bruins hockey. Had an unbelievable time. It really is like a blue-collar lunch pail city. Has a great vibe and spirit about it. I'm sure you found the same.
Yeah, well, I mean, just flying in, it's kind of a cool-looking city. There's just lots of little hills and stuff, and it's the banks of the three rivers, and there's tons of bridges, and it just kind of has a cool look to it. All the bridges have lights and stuff, and I came in on Thursday. I instantly went to the Patriots-Steelers game over at Acrisure Stadium. There was like 66,000 people. The Patriots beat the Steelers in a stunning upset. The Yinzers were deeply incensed. I mean, of the 66,000 people, there was like 500 Patriots fans who were all delighted and congregating in like the hallways and whatnot. And man, it was like incredible. And then I was going to this Magic the Gathering tournament, Eternal Weekend. There was like 1,000 people. Your boy went. Well, I mean, prizes paid out to a top 128, and so I mean, I went 7-4 and got 117th for $125. I mean, it was pretty cool. I mean, I was playing, it was just like a 2-day tournament, and on day 2, I went 0-2. And if I had just gotten like a dub there, it would have been more like, top 32. But it was an exciting tournament. I'm motivated to do better. It really is pretty dramatic playing in a high-level tournament with a lot of people. Like the later rounds, there's a lot on the line with like every single decision that you have to make, and so it's a lot of drama. It's kind of like watching football, but different. It was very enjoyable.
And was this the largest Magic tournament that you have so far in your career attended?
Yeah, I did get like second at a 300-person tournament like 10 years ago, and that was pretty cool, and that's in like a big event. And, this one obviously kicked that tournament's butt. I don't know how many like 1,000-person Magic tournaments there have been in the history of Magic the Gathering, but it can't be more than like 20. And so, all in all, it was like a pretty darn big event. I mean, the format is kind of having like a resurgence. Magic went through, like, during the COVID, money printer go burr days, the price of Magic the Gathering cards, like, skyrocketed. People were just pouring all their, Biden bucks into it, I guess, or I don't know what it was exactly. But, I mean, the cost of everything skyrocketed then. And so the price of cards and whatnot is kind of going down, and I don't know, people are actually playing with the cards and not just like hoarding them for financial speculation. My Magic the Gathering deck cost like $4,500 the one I was playing with.
Wow.
I guess you could say it's an expensive hobby, although, I mean, I can't really imagine the value of like my cards going down, especially in the long term. I mean, they're just like people try, there's these Chinese knockoffs of Magic the Gathering cards, and they're just completely different. Like even the new Magic cards, like the card stock is different from what they used to be, and you like can't recreate these original Magic the Gathering cards that came out like in 1995 or whatever. And anyway, it was pretty darn exciting. I talked about it before when we went to Nashville, but like traveling is the best. I mean, Portland, Maine does kind of stink. There's not a lot of crime and there's not a lot of traffic, and it's on the coast, so I mean that's all cool. But I mean, there's not that much to recommend this crazy place.
It's a pretty small economy outside of hospitality and tourism and commercial fishing, and we also have a lot of imports, oil imports. I understand that that the volume of oil that arrives in Portland Harbor is greater than that arrives in Boston. But if you're not in those industries, it can be hard to find work here. Well,
I was talking to my Uber driver, and he was saying that he makes like $100,000 a year. I mean, he does work 60 or 70 hours a week, but the Uber rides down there just pay more. He's saying he's making like $50 an hour or so. I mean, up here it's pretty brutal. But there's just like a lot more people, and the rents are lower down there too. I was looking at like studio apartments are like $1,000, whereas up here It's more like $1,800 for a studio.
Portland's getting to be like New York City and Boston in terms of rent prices. But hopefully there'll be some kind of a turnaround, and all that will come crashing down at some point in the future.
Well, just compared to my trip to Nashville, I would say the trip to Pittsburgh was much more exciting. And it's definitely, it seems to be more my kind of city, Pittsburgh. And so, yeah, it was a great time.
I think every lad at some point in their sports career has to choose between basketball and hockey for their winter sport. And, of course, I'm all in on hockey. And so I like the two cities that have no NBA, only NHL. Then also they have a football team and also have a baseball team. It's Pittsburgh and Tampa. Love that setup. It's the worst if you have a city like Orlando where there's only a basketball team and no other major sports. But the inverse of that, where you've got no basketball concern to take up precious time on the breathless 24-hour sports news cycle and call-in shows in the morning. If you just have your baseball, your football, and your hockey concerns, that matches my three professional sports that I'm most interested in. So I like that about Pittsburgh too. So just a question about this tournament. I remember when you went to play second at that one tournament in Worcester years ago, they had like a live feed and like announcers like you would see on football, like the football game. Was that the case with the tournament down in Pittsburgh?
They did.
Wow, I could have tuned in and checked it out, huh?
Yeah, well, I did not get any on-camera matches. Man, I had to get to like the top two of that other tournament to get on camera.
Yeah.
It helps if you're a more popular name, but I guess I'm working on it. You know, the YouTube channel is up to like 85 subscribers.
Nice. All right, that's something.
Yeah.
I remember tweeting at the announcers during the tournament, the aforementioned tournament in Worcester, and telling them that Brian Knott was coming for that number one spot, and we wanted to see Brian on there. But again, they didn't put you on to the finals, even though they read the tweets on the air. They didn't put your game on until you were like in the final, contest.
Yeah. Well, you got Gabriel Nassif, who's kind of like a big name in the Magic the Gathering circuit.
Never heard of him. Zero.
Talking about me and getting him to believe that there's a big following for yours truly. So
I see.
funny.
Okay, I thought you were going to say this was your opponent versus he was the announcer. I got it.
Yeah.
I was wanting to disrespect your opponent. The other thing you mentioned there is the inflating price of Magic cards, which makes me think a little bit of modern monetary theory, which is an idea I've been kicking around like a soccer ball lately. The idea here is that when the government prints money and uses it to buy things that are limited in value, like they're going to mine a certain amount of silver, but there's only so much silver in the mines, or assets that are limited. If the government is giving people money to buy that's not that's going to cause a crazy inflation. But things that are unlimited, like, for example, number of babysitting hours, services rendered, or number of elder care hours.
Eggs.
Anything where the supply is not constrained. The idea behind MMT, as I understand it, is that you're not going to end up with an inflation under those circumstances. So when there's a lot of ditches that need to be dug, or when there's a lot of work that needs to be done, it makes sense to have government step in and print the money to pay for those things, because you're expanding the economy at the same rate that you're expanding the money supply when you do that. The banking interests do not want us printing money they want to make sure we don't print money out of thin air like honest Abe Lincoln did during the Civil War, because they want to sell us our money as a private business. So they want to make sure that all the governments of the world borrow money from their rich people to print money instead, some combination of borrowing from the rich and taxing everyone. Now, the idea that the wealthy are always the idea that comes from the most powerful, most wealthy sectors of our country is that you have to. They would prefer that rather to cut slash taxes to the bone and then have the government borrow from the rich and then the rich get interest versus having the money taxed away from them. But I think the reality is, or at least in the domain of resources that are not like magic cards, that are infinitely renewable, that's just sort of a fable or a myth that we live by, that keeps the structure of the pyramid, where you pay the level above you on the pyramid, you have to pay them tribute. It keeps that pyramid alive. So anyway, just a funny comment that your comment about the ever inflating price of magic cards made me think of.
Well, I mean, there is a lot of religion about economics. Your boy, the socialist professor there,
Professor Richard Wolff.
Yeah, has gone on about it. It's just, I mean, everyone's like opinion about Marxism. Well, we've talked about it a bunch, but yeah, there's just this weird opinion about Marxism that just acknowledging the idea that society is going to collapse under its own weight. When I don't know, like if you just said that to anyone, like who would disagree at this point?
Yeah. Yeah, and then there's also the thing where it's not that we want people to understand about Marxism, and we don't want people, we want people to weigh carefully the arguments to be found therein versus the orthodox arguments of our. We want people to not learn about Marxism. It's like the Black Bible. You shouldn't even open the book. You might end up with a intellectual contagion that spreads from person to person like a disease does helplessly, and we don't want that to happen. So you must never crack a Karl Marx book, or you will not be assigned to read that book in high school or college, any of Marx's work in high school or college, because we just want to treat it like the Black Bible, where it's you don't want to consort with the devil at all. So anyway, very interesting to notice these things in our society.
Well, this idea that we should just accept like our inflation of like 5 to 10% a year is like completely insane, at least on all the things that are not limited, as you say. And so I mean, I guess you see it on big screen TVs. But like the price of like eggs and soda and most things, I mean, these things just get easier and easier to mass produce, right? And it's just insane that prices are going up, like clothes and whatnot. It is just there's a big religion about it. And you just start to notice it, especially when you talk about Karl Marx.
Within the capitalist system, there are two major wings, right? There's the industrial capitalists, the people who are building factories and trying to build ever bigger factories and capture the benefits of economies of scale, so that the price of goods steadily comes down. And then you have the finance capital, who have situated themselves at the peak of the pyramid, and who use the symbolism of the ancient Egyptian religion to mark their as their calling card, the unfinished pyramid, the Eye of Horus, the things you see at the back of the dollar bill. These guys want a certain amount of inflation every year, so that you don't just hold your cash. If you put your cash in your mattress, the value of it loses 3-4% every year. So then you're forced to invest it using their crazy investment banks, and then they can make more money off of you. So it really is it's a wild scam. And the paradigm, you imagine just saving your money but having it gradually over time become more and more valuable. I mean, that would be a totally different paradigm than the one we live in. But this is considered to be the one and only way that we should live. And anyone who disagrees, especially powerful people who run other foreign countries, tend to find their countries bombed into oblivion if they don't subscribe to this orthodoxy. What is the name of the general who talked about, in the wake of 9/11, who talked about the 9 countries that the U.S. was going to have to invade? What was the name of that? I can't remember now. It's a famous thing. We'll add it to the show notes.
Let's just look it up here.
Okay. So the guy we're thinking of is General Wesley Clark. Wesley Clark, and I'm reading here from the internet now, a former commander of NATO's forces in Europe. Clark claims he met a senior military officer in Washington in November 2001 who told him the Bush administration was planning to attack Iraq first before taking action against Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Iran, Somalia, and Sudan. So that just goes to show you what happens when countries don't want to participate in the central bank regime that rules so much of the world these days. There's just a few outposts out there like North Korea, and these people are they're cut off from the rest of the world. But yeah, that's what I think is happening. I think that the whole thing is people who believe in religions or myths, they don't think of those things as religions or myths. They think of those things as bedrock reality that anyone can see, and we just live in this regime or this paradigm of 3, 4, 5% inflation every year. And when inflation gets too hot, we punish the working class by raising rates and looking for a certain unemployment rate. We target inflation, unemployment, and interest rates. So those are the 3 rates that the Federal Reserve manages. And I think you could have money creation as a public utility, like the Bank of North Dakota, which is a publicly owned bank that the North Dakotans run and have run for 100 years now. And that bank handles a lot of the money creation and other monetary needs that the North Dakotans have, and no Republican or Democrat ever dares to interfere with it politically because everyone in North Dakota loves that bank. So anyway, That all came from your story of magic card inflation. It makes me think of the religion under which we are ruled. We don't think of this being the best way that anyone can live, and we should never consider living any other way. That's the way that's the religion of our time. It's the medium we're all swimming in.
Well, it is funny, just like how much do we talk about like Ukraine, Israel, but I mean, how long has America been involved in Syria? It's just
Yeah.
At least 10 or 15 years, and yeah.
Well, I think there's a great conflict going on in the broader Middle East, and that has to involves oil pipelines. And I think that the Israel, America, Saudi Arabia axis wants to have oil that is pumped through the ports in through the Mediterranean ports onto container ships from the Middle East, and move to the world markets from there. But there's the Russians and the Iranians want to have oil pumped not by sea but over land through Turkey, and Syria, of course, is the hot spot where all of this conflict is taking place. So you've got a collision of American and Israeli and Saudi interests in Syria against Russian and Iranian interests. But I feel like lately the Saudis are flipping sides. We're kind of losing the Saudis here because, well, I mean, the way we run things is completely crazy.
Yeah, I was going to say that too. Yeah, that I mean, I think Israel and the United States are pretty deeply embedded to each other, but Saudi Arabia is like a mercenary, and they just need to sell their oil, and they can tell, which way the wind is blowing here.
Yeah.
Well, they probably, I mean, just the way we talk about Ukraine all the time over here, they probably talk about Syria like a lot, like in Iran and Russia, because it's like a crazy transgression over there and very close to them and important to what they're doing. Yep.
All right. Well, this was some great preamble, Brian, but I understand you have a few other topics besides just Pittsburgh to bring up on the pod today.
Yeah. Well, I guess to continue, I'll sort of segue it here. But, just going to Pittsburgh, and was talking about how Portland stinks. Well, my lease here expires at the end of April, right? And so, I mean, I don't know. I work for AAA, and the way AAA works is that Pittsburgh is connected to, it's like Maine, Pennsylvania, Texas, Alabama, and California are sort of the subsect of AAA that I work within. And so I could relatively easily get a job in Pittsburgh. And I don't know. Well, I think I hate living in Portland. But, my mission here is I've come on here and talked about how many weeks it's been since I smoked the weed and whatnot. Yeah. So my new mission is to come on here and talk about how long it's been since I looked at pornography. Yeah. So right now I'm at about 24 hours.
Well, that's not a great streak, but I'm sure you could cobble together a few more days than that.
I mean, it would be ideal if I could make it work in Portland. Like right now, it's like my job to make things work for the contractors who work for AAA, who do the roadside assistance, which involves a lot of wine and dining of them, which is relatively cushy, you might say. And if I go to Pittsburgh, I'll have to accept some other kind of job that's probably a bit more grunt-like, although I don't know. It's just like handling like insurance claims isn't really that hard. It's pretty easy and not stressful. Dealing with these contractors, I mean, I guess some of them are ornery and crazy, and that can be stressful. And there's all these AAA is always like effing with shit. You think it would be easy to like run a roadside assistance network, but it's like crazy from the bottom up. Just like the contractors aren't even like paid reliably. If they're not going in there and checking their statements, like there's like all kinds of problems and whatnot. It's not at all simple. Like Uber is pretty straightforward. You just run the call, they tell you how much you're going to get paid, and that's that. There's no question about how much you're being paid, but that's just not how it is. Anyway.
So AAA is a creaking, wheezing machine, is it, with a lot of issues and errors?
Yeah, well, it's like this ship you got to keep running, and the hull is leaking and whatnot, and you got to patch it up here, and it requires all kinds of attention, and that's like my job is to deal with the problems that come up. But on the other hand, a lot of it is wine and dining these contractors, which is nice. But anyway, so I don't know. I don't know if I can like make it like work here in Portland or whatnot. Or it is sad. I don't know if I move to Pittsburgh, if it would just be like depressing to live in Pittsburgh and much nicer city. Although there is like the working class vibe on what you described before. I feel like if I can't stand living here in 4 or 5 months, or by the end of April, I'm definitely moving. But I guess I have to try to really give it a fair shot here. And so the plan is is to come in here and I'll provide the weekly updates as to where my time since pornography watched.
Well, how does pornography relate to a potential move to move to the Berg?
Well, because I think if you pornography undermines from an Asian perspective, you might say like you're leaking out your jing or whatever. You're burning your jing on this futile endeavor, as opposed to accomplishing what you're trying to you're undermining your testosterone or. You're making yourself weak. You're taking your life essence and shooting it out your dick, right?
Yeah, definitely. Well, you remember the Palantír from Lord of the Rings, the crystal ball which Sauron gazes into, and thus falls under the sway of the evil Dark Lord Sauron.
Right.
Yeah, that's how I feel about the pornog, man. It's just like that crazy looking stone, the show stone that Sauron has. It's tempting. You're like, there's nothing more interesting than what the contents of that stone can show you. But gazing into it is you can never recover. It corrupts your soul gradually but surely. Man, it really is. It's really detrimental, I think, to just your endocrine system, whatever the parts of your body that secrete the hormones, and your whole personality is a result of this very delicate chemical balance. And I think that the balance is thrown off, is like swamped like a rogue wave swamping a cruise ship with the pornography.
Yeah, I mean, part of the thing about smoking the weed is, well, I feel like it's detrimental at a philosophical level just because it changes how you get your validation. And so, I mean, the opening mind aspect of it is certainly a thing. But there is this thing where, well, it's useful in that you can just be miserable all day, and you can I'll do this run or whatever, and I'll just smoke the weed later. But it just changes your philosophical approach to life. It gets you at a deep level, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, so I think weed and pornography are greatly analogous in the sense you just said, of course. But I think that if they're an occasional treat, they're not going to harm you. But when you organize your life around those dopamine hits, you really will end up in a hellish place worthy of Dante himself. I mean, I spent a long time if I had to do something that wasn't smoking the weed, I would be very cranky. You can hold on to sunset, 4 or 5, 6 o'clock to smoke. But if you have that great thing to look forward to at the end of every day, weed, like the pornography, it can become the star by which you're navigating your boat. And when that happens, you are truly, truly fucked. It's the worst. So yeah, I think that moving to Pittsburgh and trying to avoid the pornography as much as you can avoid crashing your rocks, as much as you can avoid being attracted by the call of the sirens on the P hub and crashing your boat on their rocks, you're going to be the better for it. I moved myself. Obviously, we both grew up in Maine. I moved to Florida after high school for college. Was down there for 8 years. Met some of the best people. Wouldn't have traded it for anything. Even though Florida's a crazy place, it was really good to get away from home and move to a new location. It was a huge growing experience for me. I would recommend it for you any day of the week. And then furthermore, I moved back to Maine in the summer of 2010, and at that time, the scene in Portland was exciting. There was a lot of really good bars and clubs, and we got to know the people at the various spots, and we would figure out which places were cool, which ones were not, which bar is cool, which bar the cool people are going to, kind of, what the hot spot is, kind of in the way that fashion changes. No one person gets to dictate the direction it heads in, but if you have your finger on the pulse, you can figure it out. And I would say that Portland underwent a golden era, from my perspective, and that lasted right up until the 2020 during COVID. I remember Trace and my lovely fiance Tracy and I found a speakeasy. You came a couple of times, I think. Essentially, all the bars and restaurants were shut down, so there was impromptu bars popping up. And this one, the store was a frame shop, like it was just an innocuous business. But in the basement, the owner let us use it for our parties. And for a while, we were the cool people in Portland. And then I remember LFK, one of the local bars, became the cool spot. But since the real estate disaster here, the jacking up of rents for all of the people who have jobs in Portland and in New York, all the people who have jobs in Boston and New York moved to Portland during the COVID era, trying to get away from some of that congestion where people are stacked too much on top of each other, blew the rents out here. And so now we're seeing all the coffee shops close, all the bars that were here from 2010 to 2020 are gone now. Rivalries, our favorite spot for watching the Patriots, used to be popping. It used to say on the Bills website that this was the place for Bills fans to converge who were non-local, who were living in Maine, to watch their weekly Bills play football. And it was great. We knew the same people. You start to establish a rapport with the wait staff, and it was awesome.
Well, they had these Bud Light mini pitchers for $5.50, and that's just the kind of thing that never happens anymore.
Yeah,
and the restaurant and bar scene has really it changed with the increasing rents, and it definitely, the vibe of the city has changed.
All the kids have gone. In other words, LFK is not cool anymore, as we found out a couple weeks back when the captain was here. It's just it's sad that the few surviving bars aren't the same as mentioned. All the restaurants are gone. Just all the old spots have just been eliminated. Like the bankers blowing out all the rents nationwide, and then the desirability of we're always in the top 10 most desirable cities to live in when various magazines, travel mags and whatnot print up their lists. That the combination of the bankers and the desirability of Portland has just made it so that no one who's young can live here. And I got to think Pittsburgh is not that way, but you're going to have to go and find out. It may be just as depressing there as here. And I know they have the Pornhub in Pittsburgh. But I really think you should give it a try. We'll have to do this podcast via the internet, but that's never been more possible than it is in this day and age.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's the option of just staying in Portland and traveling a lot, or I could move to Pittsburgh with Wiz Khalifa. Yeah, I'll be from pistol banging where them shooters is. That's what Wiz Khalifa says. I guess in other news, Alex Jones has been freed on the Twitter. It's funny because everyone knows that Alex Jones said some shit about Sandy Hook being some kind of government setup. But what he was actually banned for, though, was for confronting Mark Rubio at a hearing, ironically, with Twitter and Facebook about how foreign interference and basically the content that they were allowing. And so Alex Jones is freed. And so I don't know, I guess a lot of people hate Alex Jones, but it is funny. Alex Jones did used to be a champion of the left. During the George Bush years after 9/11. The dude predicted that 9/11 was going to happen. You can find the clips there. It's crazy. And he also predicted what was going to happen with the mask mandates and this business in the Ukraine as well. And man, well, if you watch that Waking Life movie, Alex Jones is in there.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, Waking Life, great film. Shout out to Julie for first showing us Waking Life. And that was outstanding. Yeah, it was interesting that he was in Waking Life. I forgot about that component.
Yeah, and so, I guess Alex Jones seems like a scary guy. Apparently he had some incident in his youth where he got his head smashed into some cement, someone did the wrestling move where you drop someone on their head basically onto some cement, and so maybe that explains why Alex Jones is a little crazy. But man, I've always basically thought that Alex Jones is awesome.
Yeah, I kind of agree. He's clearly a little off. His personality is larger than life. I'll never forget the clip of Joey Diaz being on his InfoWars show, and Joey Diaz is another crazy person, and so they were just they were just bouncing off of each other, and their wave function, their harmonic resonance was just stacking higher and higher until it just became hilarious. But Alex Jones has been right about a shocking amount of stuff in his time. And I will always think fondly of Mr. Jones for his expose on Bohemian Grove from the early 2000s. Where he snuck onto this place where, this place is something that Reagan and Nixon have acknowledged in their time, Bohemian Grove, where rich people go to act out pagan ceremonies. And sure enough, if you can find you can find his clip on the internet. Searching for it on DuckDuckGo might be a good place to start, because you won't find it on YouTube. But sure enough, there's a huge wooden effigy of a pagan god.
Well, it's a giant owl statue, and they've got like this burning effigy in front of it.
And they're like chanting. It evokes Eyes Wide Shut, the that film that Stanley Kubrick produced directed, and that came out in 2001 with Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise, that shows what rich people are up to behind closed doors.
Well, you gotta love the commitment to free speech by Elon Musk. And, well, I guess I have been seeing articles saying that advertisers are trickling back to X after Elon Musk's, anti-Semitic retweet or whatever, which we talked about last time. And I think, maybe you're out on Alex Jones right now, you the listener. But, well, when the next shocking scandal happens... Twitter's going to be in place. They're not going to, be able to say the Hunter Biden laptop is Russian disinformation. Hunter Biden, there's the whole thing's happening right now. They're actually having judicial hearings and whatnot, and it's just going to be important to have these things in place going into this next election year, when our reptilian overlords are going to try to pull some shit. Yes,
indeed. I share your excitement. It's interesting that one of those major social media networks has broken ranks and will no longer it will no longer blindly follow what the State Department or what law enforcement, the upper echelons of law enforcement structure in this country want them to publish. Or they won't suppress what they're ordered to suppress by government. And so that's made me pretty excited about using Twitter versus Reddit. And one thing I've noticed about Reddit, interesting, I guess I'm going to have to abandon Reddit. I don't know. It's just becoming. You can see it's happening again as the clock ticks closer to the calendar year 2024. You can just see, just like it did in 2020 and 2016, Reddit is just being besieged. And one of the interesting trends I've noticed in the past couple of weeks or so is this business of the vibe session. In other words, there's all manner of media outlets are putting out this information that the economy is great if you look at GDP and unemployment and lowering inflation, and that this is all, and then this is a result of Bidenomics, and we should be very excited about the recession, very excited about the economy. And the term I've seen popping up online is the vibe session, where everyone feels very negatively about the economy, and that's just vibes, and that really people are stupid for not liking the economy. But it's like if you go to the grocery, if you're under 35 and you don't already have a house, if you are any age and you don't already have a house, you won't be getting one. Rent prices are up to a ridiculous degree, and everyone knows that basic things like your insurance or your groceries are the price of that is never coming down to pre-COVID levels. It's like everyone is aware that the economy is rotten, and it's wild to see all this gaslighting, trying to convince us that if we feel poorly about the economy, it's just based on vibes and nothing else, as if GDP is a heavily politicized figure that's meant to. It's linked to like interest rates, and it's also linked to entitlement payments, and so there's a huge political incentive to understate GDP as much as possible. That's why, and then understate inflation and overstate GDP. So it's why rents are included in it's like if you own a house, the rent you could charge for that house is called imputed rent, and that is all captured as part of GDP. If your credit card rate goes from 19% to 26%, and the credit card company makes more money off of you, that's an increase to GDP. If your apartment complex jacks up your rent and makes you pay more every month just to have the same roof over your head, that's an increase in GDP. You can see how fraudulent these economic figures are. And I've just noticed specifically on this subreddit r/fluent in finance, Another one r/economics, and even another one r/out of the loop are just become heavily controlled to where you can't even believe the opinions you're seeing on there. Get this, I saw on r/out of the loop a defense of seed oils, right? The question was, what's the deal? Why is everyone out on seed oils all of a sudden? And like the top comment was because that it's a fringe conspiracy that seed oils are bad for you. I was like, wow.
It's the alt-right, man.
Yeah, it's like, I couldn't believe it. I just was like, everyone knows that seed oils are a disaster. Seed oils meaning things like, I can't believe it's
canola
not butter.
oil.
Yeah, like all of this, it's absolutely, even partially hydrogenated vegetable oils, even corn syrup, like the sugar from corns that's replaced all the regular sugar in all of our soda since the early 90s, or the vegetable oil that the fries at McDonald's are cooked in versus the beef tallow that they had prior to 1991. It's just, I couldn't believe it. So it really is interesting to see Reddit hurtling towards a initial public offering as they are, just having these insane posts that I just have to blink my eyes. And so I'm excited that at least one of these big social media giants is putting up the middle finger to the establishment. And so that's why I doubled down. I decided to actually pay for Twitter. And so I have the $16 a month subscription, which is, I just kind of want to support Twitter because they're going to find crazy things on Twitter, but at least they're not going to toe the party line and parrot an orthodoxy that we all know is a fraudulent one.
Well, the hyper normalization is more transparent than grandma's underpants, huh?
Yeah. Yes. It sure is.
And you can just see why. Like, if you're an advertiser, what are you gonna do? Like, advertise on the things that everyone knows is like false? I think it's pretty widely. Just like Pfizer supports CNN. Not because it makes them money, but so they can control the content, right? That's just the kind of advertising that goes on, like on the so-called mainstream networks. And so, I think Elon Musk, he's just got his foot crammed in the door there, so they can't. Just what are you going to do if you want people actually engaging and not, manufactured nonsense? Then what choice do you have? It's perfect.
That old gif of Jerry Seinfeld in the movie theater throwing up his hands in disgust and leaving the theater?
Yeah.
With each person that finally says, you know what, I'm being gaslit by, it used to be just the mainstream news, but in online, like in 2012, but online was like safe. But now that all the social media giants are gaslighting people, every day more and more people wake up, and the more people that throw their hands up like Seinfeld in disgust and say, you know what, I'm not going to just believe, I have to go to where there may be crazy things being said, but at least I'm not being, gaslit to an obvious degree to believe something like seed oils are perfectly fine and that it's a fringe conspiracy to notice that seed oils are catastrophic for your health. With each person that does that, the advertising base for people who value free speech grows, and the companies are going to have to respond to that. If it becomes popular, if Twitter wins this, if more, it's going to get to the point, I predict that social media companies are going to have to be more like Twitter or lose their advertisers. So if we can reach a tipping point, if we can really slowly shift to where people would rather wade through crazy conspiracy theories and come to their own conclusions versus being told something that's obviously not true, then maybe Elon Musk will be eventually vindicated. I don't know. I don't know what to make of Musk exactly, but I'm excited to give that Twitter exists as a place as an alternative, and I'm excited to be on Spotify, at least for now, because that's where you can hear the JRE. They won't censor the Joe Rogan Experience, and so I'm happy to be a Spotify customer for the time being also. And hopefully more and more people will feel the same over time.
Indeed.
Well, I have one last topic for this week, and it's another side note on the alchemical journey. Now, you may recall, Brian, we've talked about the alchemical journey a lot the past couple of podcasts. This notion that you're really, even though you're trimming your sails according to a certain North Star, actually arriving at that North Star is not the real goal. The journey is the important part of life. Something that's hard to keep in mind. And I think we've talked about how the hedge maze out behind the Palazzo Pitti in Florence, the Medici's old palace, reflects this notion. But there's one sense in which the alchemical journey holds true that we haven't talked much about, and that's really the meditative sense. In other words, arriving back at the present moment. You know how easy it is to get distracted by these constructs, the past and the future, the ghost of Christmas past and the ghost of Christmas future. I mean, how much time have you spent in the shower cringing over the shameful things you may have said in the fourth grade, or worrying about something in the future that might be coming your way that never, well, the vast majority of things we worry about never actually come to fruition, right? There's the past and the future. They're not like real. They're models you create inside your mind. Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah. And the goal of meditation is to pop those thought bubbles, stick a pin in and burst those thought bubbles and instead arrive at the present moment. The feeling you get when you hear a particularly provocative, lick from David Gilmour's guitar, or you see a particularly beautiful painting or something like that. That's really, that recognition of beauty really brings you back in the present moment. Or you see a beautiful woman on the sidewalk, it brings you back to the present. You forget about all of the future things you're ruminating about and all of your past humiliations you're still holding on to, or maybe you're angry about. And that's the goal of meditation. Is that now how you have been a practitioner in some of the Eastern traditions? Is that how you view meditation? Like, is that your conception of it?
Well, there's this practice like anchoring the breath, and the way, you basically pay attention to your breathing. You start by like listening to your nose, and then you like listen to your throat, and then you listen to both of them, and then you do like your upper torso, and then like diaphragm, lower body, and like doing this like brings you into the present. It like changes the shape of your consciousness in the way like looking at like scrolling through like Reddit or the social medias nonstop also definitely affects your consciousness. Like this affects your consciousness like in a different way. And it affects the disposition of your mind in a way that's clearly positive.
Yeah, like going for a nice drive in the country is going to have a positive impact on your consciousness.
Yeah,
and watching homeless people battle it out on the sidewalk in a no holds barred cage match is
deleterious.
Yeah, it's like woof, depressing. Bad for the overall consciousness. Yeah. Now, is that specifically a Neigong concept? And can you give us a really brief where does Neigong fit into the history of religious ideas from Asia?
Well, man, I'm no Neigong expert, but basically Neigong is a tradition that is in China. It comes out of Taoism. And it is practicing the internal arts and, just in our Western world, like nobody has this figured out basically. And there's just a lot of like woo-woo nonsense. I mean, what you need is a lot of discernment to get in there and figure out like what's real and what's not with regard to meditation. And so, it is about like cultivating chi. It's about how to like actually cultivate chi in a way that is not nonsense and like, it just isn't woo woo. When you've got it, you know it. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that makes sense. We have this idea that we have this focus on materialism in our culture. The idea is that we are tiny little individuals moving around inside of a grand creation, and a lot in the nature, the state of your consciousness is something we short shrift that concept. Because we want people to buy things, right? If you can convince people that, if you can play on their anxieties or make them compare themselves to their neighbors, if you can, in other words, inflaming people's egos, inflaming people's jealousies, and inflaming people's insecurities, inflaming their conceptions of the past, but especially of the future, you can really stimulate that swiping of the card behavior.
Buy.
Yeah. And so we could totally lose sight of the present moment where, like, if you're looking forward to the next thing you're going to acquire, then you're totally lost, and you're off with the ghost of Christmas future, and you're not here in the present where there's beauty everywhere. Right? We tile over. We don't notice the beauty in the present moment because we're distracted by these visions of the future. And this is something the old magical tradition in the European magical tradition now, so we're moving from China back to Europe, emphasized heavily. This notion of the archetypical hero's journey, which in a lot of cases is more literal, but in the very most basic cases, this idea that the place that you are meant, you're meant, the journey takes you back to the place you started with. You learn that the journey is the thing of value, and the destination is valueless. It's only a navigation tool. And I always think of Paulo Coelho's the book The Alchemist. The whole punchline of that book is that the young lad who's the protagonist sets off on this long journey. He sees many strange and wonderful things, only to find out the thing he was seeking is buried in the backyard of his own home where he started the journey. And that is the idea behind meditation also. Like the Neigong, I also, when I meditate, it's a lot of focusing on your breathing. And like a runaway movie projector, my mind starts clattering and projecting these other things that I have to stop, get back to the present moment. It's the habit of like just being lost in thought. It's very hard to break. And so meditation is really practicing, breathing is a great way to anchor yourself to the present moment, is trying to just get back to the present in the sense of the alchemical journey. And that really, I've really come to regard, it's much like considering the things Alex Jones has to say or taking them seriously, or considering the things Karl Marx has to say or taking them seriously. The taking magic seriously is quite off the reservation in our current consumer-driven society. And I forever assumed that was because magic was a childish conception of reality. It's a childish conception of the state of the universe. But the more you crack history books, the more you realize that there's really two fundamental ways of conceiving of your presence in the universe. And one of them is the materialist one, the Christian one, the scientific one, all the same, right? We should notice that science has a lot of the same hallmarks as Christianity. It has its apocalypse, right? It's looking forward to the end times, and those end times are a direct result of some flaw in human character, right? It's the same religious story. They've just gone from many gods to zero gods, to one god to zero gods, but it's the same fundamental orientation towards reality. Well, now, but the other way of viewing things is that the universe is really something that's going on inside your head, and that we are fundamentally in, like, the materialist worldview is a fundamental inversion of true reality. And in a lot of times and places, the tradition of magic wasn't just some ethereal, childish conception of what may or may not be possible. It was the actual political resistance to, like, the empire, like the Holy Roman Empire, right? The Holy Roman Empire had everything organized where the rich people were collecting their tribute every month and year, and regular peasants were just expected to fall in line. And the alternative to that, the magical conception, was something that people had to be burnt at the stake for. And that, just like Marx and just like Alex Jones, we shouldn't look into magic. We shouldn't take it seriously. We should only dismiss it as childish. But the Medicis of Florence took magic very seriously. And that's why they laid out their hedge maze the way they did. And I think that it's something that I'm excited to look much more into.
Yeah, well, I think it'll probably be increasingly relevant as we move forwards into this next election year and whatnot. I mean, one thing about the nature... Well, you have, like, the establishment media, like we talked about, versus, the X, where there's actual people. And, I mean, increasingly, the establishment's going to have to urge their base to, burn the non-believers at the stake. It's going to be the only way to keep the system going forwards. But, I don't know. There is something about it staying in the present that, I mean, it is... You do have to go on that journey to sort of figure out what that means, I guess, is what it is. The journey is about, like, kind of figuring out, like, what it means. So yeah, I mean, I think I think it's a meaty topic for us to talk about every week.
Do you recall this old movie with Jim Carrey, Liar Liar?
Who could forget?
Yeah, it's like 1996 or something like that. But the point is, Jim Carrey, he can't lie, but he's a lawyer, so he's required to lie. But his vengeful coworker, his boss, pulls him into a meeting with, like, the guy that runs the law firm. You remember this? And like, she wants, like, his coworker, like, is aware that Jim Carrey hates this man, and so she pulls him into a meeting and then asks in front of everyone, what well, you were just saying how much you think of Mr. Allen, and Jim Carrey standing there with the deers and the headlights look, and she's like, well, go on, tell him what you think of him. Yeah, I'm going to try to remember the line here, but Jim Carrey's like, he's a pretentious something bastard, a belligerent old fart, a worthless steaming pile of cow dung, figuratively speaking. Remember that line? And there's like this pregnant silence. Well, the whole boardroom is like, ooh, awkward. And he starts laughing. The reaction of the Uber boss is to be like, that's just what this stuffy company needs. A little irreverence. You're a real card, Reed. And I don't know. That's what I feel about the stodgy old empire we're forced to live under. I think what it needs is a little bit of heresy to really, and that's what they're trying to prevent with controlling the social media. They've long controlled the old guard, the old corporate media, and they're trying to keep their control on lockdown. And it's just like when the wheels started coming off the Holy Roman Empire in the 14th century. Very similar idea where you have all those witch burnings and inquisitions. And so, yeah, we're going to see a lot of, we're going to see the warfare over what is heresy and what's not heresy ramped up to screaming point, ramped up to a real crazy pitch. So anyway, exciting stuff. I really, yeah.
Yeah, well, just hopefully it won't have to be so violent just with the technology that we have. But on the other hand, our reptilian overlords, they don't like to let progress happen. So, I guess we'll see. Should be quite dramatic.
Well, the internet is great. So the dissolution of Christendom, the Holy Roman Empire, led first to the Italian Renaissance and then eventually to the Protestant Reformation. And the Italian Renaissance is all about showing each other the insides of their head. And that is what I think of the internet. It's like the rise of the internet is analogous to the printing press of the late Middle Ages. And it's really a tool for each of us to show the rest of humankind the insides of our minds. And that's what, when you go to St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City and you look at Michelangelo's Pieta, which is the statue of Mary holding the broken body of her son Jesus, you go, wow. And then I think he was like 21 or something when he carved that. You can really see inside Michelangelo's mind. Or when you go to see the David, you go to the Academy of Fine Arts in Florence and look at his David statue and you go, this was a man who was very interested in the naked male form. But you can see that he sees the same thing you see inside your own mind. It's really something to there's this constrictor valve. I can only articulate my experience to you through words, and it's like that's allowing you to look through like a keyhole at what I'm seeing, and then the same when you speak. And trying to exchange traffic through that keyhole is what the name of the game is when it comes to defeating the evil empire and moving forward into a more humanitarian future.
It sure is. All right. Well, on that note, that probably wraps it up for this week, eh?
Yeah, I think I'm fresh out of topics to wax ecstatic about. So I will just remind everyone, please send us an email at knopp@substack.com. That's KNOPP. And let us know what you think of our crazy ideas. And definitely go to knopp.substack.com to read the essay versions of some of these thoughts.
All right. We'll see you guys next week.
So long, everyone. Bye-bye.